This is In the Loop. I'm Christian Bryant. Folks, we've made it to show 200, which could mean one of two things. Either we've been killing it or the bosses just haven't been paying much attention. Here's what we got for y'all. Tonight, the West braces for what could be the most dangerous wildfire season yet. Then, some government-connected central banks are buying into Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. Does that add legitimacy for digital currency, or does it just make it less cool? But first, here's what you need to know right now. Kids as young as 12 can start getting the Pfizer vaccine. The Food and Drug Administration granted emergency use authorization today. Before, it was only approved for people 16 and older. It comes at a crucial time. The number of vaccines given has been slowly dropping across the country. Last week, several states scaled back their vaccine requests due to low demand. Still, the COVID outlook in the US is looking brighter. The average daily number of new COVID cases fell below 41,000, the lowest level since September. 46% of the US population has gotten at least one dose of a COVID vaccine. With case numbers moving the right way, Dr. Anthony Fauci says the Centers for Disease Control will continue to update its mask guidance. Last month, it loosened restrictions for fully vaccinated people outdoors. The next update could ease recommendations for mask usage indoors. President Biden is really throwing down the Uno reverse card on Trump-era policies. Today, Biden restored gay and transgender protections in healthcare, which is technically a reversal of a reversal. See, the actual provision was written back under the Obama administration as a part of the Affordable Care Act. It said the law prohibits discrimination on the basis of race, color, national origin, sex, age, or disability in certain healthy programs or activities. The Trump administration decided to interpret the definition of sex to mean the gender given at birth, lifting those protections for some people. The Secretary of Health and Human Services says the Biden reversal simply clears up what everyone should already know.
There's no ambiguity. You cannot discriminate against people based on sexual orientation or gender identity.
The HHS said the move was in line with the latest Supreme Court ruling on the matter. Last year, the justices ruled a long-standing federal law barring workplace discrimination did in fact protect gay and transgender employees. There's a new trend you might have spotted. A closed restaurant, but not due to pandemic restrictions. Instead, the signs, sometimes literal signs, point to a lack of workers, with many store owners throwing some shade at the workers who quit or even at the government benefits themselves that we've seen during the pandemic. This sort of labor shortage has been getting a lot of attention, especially since a jobs report last week showed fewer people jumping back into the workforce than expected. That's led to some real hand-wringing from folks who want the federal government to rein in the COVID-era unemployment benefits.
It is a terrible jobs report, not what we were expecting at all, but that's what happens when we pay people not to work. Now again, there are families that are struggling, we want to help them out, but at some point we have to roll that back.
Now, this idea that unemployment benefits are a factor in people staying out of a job is definitely something to consider, but it's not the only factor in worker shortages. The pandemic has prompted a lot of folks to rethink their jobs, whether by choice or by force. According to a recent survey from Pew Research Center, 66% of unemployed people had seriously considered changing their work, a much higher number than in the Great Recession. And if their job isn't paying a competitive wage, they're liable to leave. The fact is, many of the restaurant and hospitality workers who found themselves with limited or no work do often have higher paying options in other sectors these days. For example, in transportation and warehousing, with average hourly earnings quite a bit higher. Basically, if a warehouse job pays almost 50% more than a restaurant gig, the restaurant might have to up its pay. Over many years now, the true value of hourly wages overall in the US has dropped or flatlined, and many workers aren't too tempted to come back and help deal with an influx of late pandemic era customers.
A lot of things have changed, and I think some employers have been caught flat-footed because there's been a more rapid return of demand for their goods and services.
There are, of course, other reasons for a labor shortage you could point to. Many in-person jobs carry COVID health risks that workers don't want to take on. With many schools not fully open, families are struggling with childcare. Regardless of the reason for this labor lag, the Federal Reserve says balance will be restored eventually.
We'll come back to this economy where we have, equilibrium between labor supply and labor demand. It may take some months, though.
A deadly wildfire season is no surprise to anyone in the American West these days. Over the last few years, fires burned up land, houses, and livelihoods in California, Oregon, and elsewhere out west. And the folks who fight those wildfires know that one key to limiting the damage is getting an early start. Newsy's Meg Hilling shows us how the front line of defense against wildfires is bracing for a drier and more dangerous season.
Copy, we're gonna let ash fall out here.
Our summers are getting longer and hotter. Our fire seasons are starting earlier, and we have that potential to basically repeat what we saw last year.
Across the American West, fire experts are bracing for what looks to be another summer of potentially devastating wildfires as the season gets underway alarmingly early.
What we're seeing this year is really an increase on fire activity, what we saw compared to last year.
In California,
we're already seeing rapid fire growth.
New Mexico, and Arizona, flames are already roaring to life. Fueling these fires, persistent drought conditions plaguing western states.
The changing environment, the changing seasons, and the lack of moisture and precipitation we get in the wintertime is really extending those fire seasons and really kind of creating that year-round fire season.
Exceptionally dry vegetation has essentially turned states like California into a tinderbox. As a result, fire agencies like CAL FIRE say they're having to adjust their approach.
We brought in extra staffing earlier in the year. What we do typically, every acre in California will burn eventually. You know, at some point in history, it will burn. We need to be prepared right now that it's going to burn in the near future.
As crews gear up to battle any wildland blaze in the months ahead, the public is being asked to take preventative action by clearing any potential fire fuel, like old leaves or dead plants, away from homes. They're also being asked to take any evacuation order seriously and to not attempt to return to their property before fire authorities say it's okay.
If you put yourself in a situation where we're at risk, where we're saving you instead of stopping that fire, that means that there's going to be other people that are going to become at risk because we didn't stop the fire where it could have.
As fire crews put in the work on the ground, the U.S. government is taking stock of the damage brought on by extreme weather conditions.
The U.S. Department of Defense has been impacted directly in just the past few years by extreme weather caused by climate change. The wildfires in California have threatened other military installations, forcing repeated evacuation.
Some high-risk states are examining their budgets to find funding that could help prevent or suppress wildfires. In April, California authorized $536 million in preparation for the upcoming months.
This early action brings over half the money that we had proposed to be set aside for wildfire preparedness and preparation and some suppression dollars, and brings it now into the present.
Fire experts say funding is also increasingly needed for research.
We're a very small group of scientists that are trying to tackle one of the biggest problems in the US right now in terms of climate change impacts on how society is going to manage landscapes. If you think about other phenomena in terms of weather, hurricanes, tornadoes, flooding, there's entire centers set up for that are federally funded. We need federal funding to really drive fire science forward.
For Newsy, I'm Meg Hilling.
When you're back, we'll tell you about how one trainer's being accused of horsing around ahead of this weekend's race at the Preakness Stakes. Saddle up, folks. We got some horse drama. Here's what's trending. Kentucky Derby winning horse Medina Spirit could be benched ahead of the Preakness this weekend after failing a post-race drug test at Churchill Downs. The horse's trainer, Bob Baffert, said Sunday his 3-year-old horse had a higher than allowed limit of a drug used to treat joint pain. To state the obvious, Medina Spirit didn't give itself the drug. After all, it isn't BoJack Horseman, so the blame falls on Baffert, who says he doesn't know how this happened.
My veterinarian, nobody here, that matter of fact, Medina Spirit has never been treated with betamethasone.
Thing is, Baffert has been dinged for drug violations before. This is the 5th time in a year one of his horses has tested positive. In light of this recent development, Churchill Downs temporarily suspended Baffert while they await the results of an investigation. If a second test comes back positive, Medina Spirit could be stripped of its Kentucky Derby win and winnings, which hasn't happened since 1968. You ever have a roommate that's kind of hilarious, but mostly a pain in the ass? If so, you might be able to relate to this trailer for an upcoming supervillain buddy comedy.
Catch up. Excuse me.
Tom Hardy is back as Eddie Brock and Venom in the sequel to 2018's Venom. This go round, he's on a collision course with another well-known comics villain, Cletus Cassidy, a serial killer who becomes Carnage, another toothy symbiote. Folks online had a good time picking out tidbits from the trailer, like the fact that this police officer is reading a copy of the Daily Bugle, the paper Spider-Man's Peter Parker works for, or that Woody Harrelson dropped that goofy hairdo from the first movie. The first Venom film was a weird one and killed at the box office, pulling in more than $850 million worldwide. By the looks of it, this Andy Serkis directed installment is gonna lean into a similar brand of comedy and chaos. Venom, Let There Be Carnage will hit theaters only on September 24th. There are plenty of rappers who could hoop. For example, Master P, whose real name is Percy Miller, suited up for the Charlotte Hornets in the '98 preseason. But J. Cole might be the first rapper with a Grammy and multiple platinum albums to take his talents to Africa. ESPN's Mark Spears reported that Cole is in Rwanda and is expected to play for the country's Basketball Africa League team, the Patriots. The New Times of Rwanda broke the news in a video posted to Twitter. Cole's involvement with the BAL is a pretty big deal. He's still an active Grammy Award-winning musician with an album on the way, and he'll be a part of a brand new basketball league during their inaugural season. The BAL is a new venture between the International Basketball Federation and the NBA. The Rwanda Patriots play the first BAL game against the Nigeria River Hoopers Sunday. If he doesn't get any burn in the first half, at least he'll be fresh for the halftime show. Cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, Ethereum, and yes, even Dogecoin have a couple different points of appeal for buyers. They can be seen as an investment, but they also just have a sticking it to the man, rage against the machine quality to them that our old paper money with presidents on them just doesn't have. But as of late, some government-connected banks have also shown interest in digital currencies. This has Newsy's Bianca Fascini wondering, how will the central bank buy-in affect the future of a currency built on decentralization?
Alex Pickard bought his first Bitcoin in 2013. Within a few years, he was all in.
People were still very skeptical, but I thought I understood it very well.
By 2017, he left his finance job in California to mine Bitcoin full-time in Washington state, where electricity costs were cheap. He spent almost $300,000 to create his own mining center, which required using high-powered computers to earn Bitcoins. But less than a year in, he had to close up shop.
I put such a strain on the grid that basically 10, burly Northwestern men came to my door and demanded that I turn off all of my machines because I was putting a strain on the grid.
Not long after, the price began to tumble, fully rendering his mining efforts useless. He's since returned to his job and holds a much different outlook on Bitcoin today.
It's deviated so far away from what it initially set out to be.
But there are still plenty of people betting big on crypto. One reason why might be the effort by central banks to create their own.
Central bank digital currencies are now possible, and we're going to see some of them around the world. And we need to understand whether that's something that would be a good thing for the people that we serve.
It's not just the Federal Reserve, though. Central banks in China, Japan, and Europe are all exploring their own digital currencies. And in the Bahamas, the sand dollar digital currency already exists. Investors are embracing central bank adoption, seeing it as a natural progression that brings legitimacy to the often misunderstood world of cryptocurrency.
I think that regulation is probably a good thing for the space and inevitable.
But its supporters maintain a bright future is ahead, whether central banks get on board or not.
Fiat currencies connect the people within a country. Bitcoin connects people that are on the internet, and that has extreme value.
Pickard's view on Bitcoin has changed, but he does think cryptocurrency in general will remain popular, even if it's not as decentralized as he once thought it was.
It's an interesting world that we're heading into with regard to central bank digital currencies and people actually using blockchains for their day-to-day transactions, because it really means every single transaction is stored into a permanent database.
Bianca Fascini, Newsy, Washington.
I ain't qualified to give y'all a stock market recap, so feel free to open your Stocks app or similar equivalent while we throw it over to an ad break. In the wake of highly publicized incidents of police misconduct, many advocates and lawmakers are looking to reform policing. One way they're doing that is by targeting the ways police are protected from lawsuits. Newsy's Stephanie Liebergen gives us a breakdown of qualified immunity and why some want to eliminate it.
Lawmakers on Capitol Hill are trying to negotiate a bipartisan bill to reform federal policing laws, and qualified immunity is a key sticking point. Qualified immunity protects government officials, including police officers, from lawsuits. It means you can only sue if the violation of your rights has already been clearly established.
It requires civil rights plaintiffs to show not just that their rights were violated, but they also have to find a prior judicial decision in their jurisdiction where someone else's rights were violated in nearly the same way.
The concept is not written in U.S. law. Rather, it's a consequence of court rulings. Opponents argue it prevents the public from holding law enforcement officials accountable for their actions, something that happens with most other professions.
When we think about professionals doing their job, that we recognize that mistakes happen sometimes. And for that reason, we do require certain professionals to carry insurance. It's the reason why we all carry insurance for our automobiles, because we recognize that accidents happen.
Supporters worry that without qualified immunity, courts would get bogged down with a swarm of lawsuits and police officers might be afraid to do their job. But the state of Colorado shows the result might not be that extreme. In 2020, the state eliminated qualified immunity for most of its police officers, making them individually liable up to $25,000.
While there have been some suits brought under this new provision, it has absolutely not been, the flood of frivolous litigation that some defenders of qualified immunity were predicting would happen if you got rid of the doctrine.
One compromise option lawmakers are considering is changing the provision to make police departments liable in place of the individual officer.
If we do that in law enforcement, the employer will change the culture. So as opposed to having one officer change or not change, we'll have all officers transforming because the departments are taking on more of that burden.
But Jay SCHWEIKERT from the Libertarian Cato Institute says department liability would only work in conjunction with individual liability.
Because it is, in essence, telling the public, we've heard your complaints about officer misconduct. In response, we're going to say it's impossible to hold individual officers accountable. But don't worry, you, the taxpayer, will now be on the hook financially for all of their misconduct.
But that's already happening now. A study published in 2014 found police officers rarely contribute to any judgment or settlement against them in civil rights cases. In the more than 9,200 cases examined, police officers paid just 0.02% of the total dollar amount awarded to the plaintiffs. Villanova University law professor TERI RAVENELL says any discussion about changing qualified immunity needs to keep the plaintiffs in mind, especially when considering who ultimately foots the bill.
If we're actually talking about damages, that they've also suffered some sort of real or actual injury. So if they aren't compensated, then that loss ends up falling on them.
It was a 1982 Supreme Court ruling that gave us qualified immunity as it's understood today. Since then, the justices have heard dozens of cases dealing with the doctrine, but only a handful of plaintiffs have convinced the High Court that qualified immunity should not apply. Stephanie Liebergen, Newsy, Washington.
If you haven't done so already, feel free to reach out to us on Twitter using the hashtag NewsyInTheLoop. This show premieres in the evenings, but if you watch us in the mornings, just pretend this is a cup of coffee. It'll take a bit of imagination though, because it's almost always definitely not coffee, if you know what I'm saying. As we start to get a handle on the COVID pandemic, the US is battling another kind of widespread problem, gun violence. It's an epidemic that kills more than 100 people each day. One evidence-based approach to stemming gun violence is for credible messengers to mediate conflicts before they get out of control. National reporter LLOYD introduces us to volunteers in Stockton, California, who use their experiences on the street to save lives.
Hello, how y'all doing? My name is BURNICE REDIC. JULIAN Balderama.
This is Jefferson Strickland. I'm MAURICE GOENS. Advanced Peace, Stockton, California.
These men come from different neighborhoods.
but their childhoods were all cut short by the same thing.
I was young and I was gangbanging and I was selling drugs and I was just like doing what I thought was necessary for me to be able to survive at the time.
Gangs and guns were a way to get ahead in a rough neighborhood.
My mom would cry and ask me, go play outside and see if you can get invited into one of your friends' house for dinner, because our food was gone. I had to eat, and I started breaking into people's houses to steal food. So I guess I became what you would call a criminal, because I was hungry.
But those crimes escalated to shootings and to decades behind bars. A life of violence became the norm.
I was one of the ones that was a cancer to Stockton. I made it bad.
Julian Balderama worried he didn't have it in him to escape.
There's nothing normal about burying all your childhood friends. There's nothing normal about having bullet wounds and rest in peace tattoos of your friends all over your body. And there's nothing normal about your kids having to sleep on the floor because you don't know if once again gunshots will ring out and your house is going to be peppered with bullets.
These men are now using their experience on the streets for a new mission.
To stop gun violence here in the city of Stockton.
And they do that every day by coming together through the nonprofit Advance Peace Stockton.
Something simple, just interact with them.
Whoever is actively involved with shooting or getting shot, more than likely those are the same people. We focus on them.
They spend hours walking the streets they grew up on.
Pimping was good. Talk to me, I listen.
Building relationships with those involved in gun violence.
Come back to the hood.
All to mediate conflicts between different gangs and groups before bullets go flying.
We are the perfect messengers, credible messengers. People know our lifestyles, people know our histories, and they know that we're not out to take their freedom, just really give them different options, for them to make better choices.
Sometimes they're caught in the middle of the very violence they try to prevent.
The other day, I call it a misunderstanding. Some shooting happened and I was hit, and I'm okay.
But they're not deterred because they've seen success.
I do it, because I want them to be safe. I want them to grow and be something better, So I give what I got when I can to help that on.
And it's working. Advance Peace started in 2018. Since then, gun violence murders and assaults are down 47% in North Stockton, and murders involving guns are down 20% citywide.
I feel it's mandatory, and we have a duty as people from this community to give back to this community. We're giving hope to our people out there in the streets.
Hope for the next generation and healing for their own wounds all at once.
This job is therapy. It helps me to sleep at night and be able to look at myself in the mirror. I can't rewind time, but what I can do is focus on a lot of other people that are walking the same path I did and he is, and make sure that things don't end up that way.
I'm Alexa Liaco reporting.
That's it for us, gang. As always, thanks for watching. We'll be back tomorrow with more in the loop. Same time, same place. Top stories from Newsy are headed your way right now.